Rolika Roach, and welcome to the Live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. At this time, I invite the Minister of Public Housing, Spatial Planning, Environment and Infrastructure, the Honorable Christopher Waver, to address you.
Good morning. Thank you, Ms. Roach. Good morning to the members of the local media and those listening via radio or live stream on Facebook, and also a pleasant good morning to my Council of Ministers, Honorable Prime Minister. I would also like to congratulate my new colleagues in the Council of Ministers on their appointments, and I look forward to continuing the vital work needed for the people of St. Martin with you all. Today, I would also like to take the opportunity to once again introduce myself briefly. I was born on September 8, 1981. I'm happily married with 2 children, Audrey, 9 years old, and my son Liam, who is now 2 years old. As for my educational background, I attended the Sis Marie Laurence Primary School, then went to St. Dominic High School, and went off to St. Thomas University in Miami, Florida, where I received a bachelor's degree in psychology and minored in tourism and hospitality. Before becoming Minister of Romi and acting Minister of VSA, I was the Chief of Staff in the Cabinet of Romi. I have also worked as a research assistant at Division Examination for the Government of St. Martin and provided group counseling along with conflict resolution, support amongst others as a social worker at the Dr. J Enterprise here in St. Martin. I was also a social worker for the Foundation Catholic Education in St. Martin. As a trained social worker, I have seen the challenges families face in our communities when trying to raise their children in difficult economic times. These challenges have been compounded by the recent devastation caused by the hurricanes Irma and Maria, which has left many homeless. Still today, over 2 years later, roof repairs are still not sufficient. Considering the terrible state of many private homes, this is an issue I intend to continue championing with your support until real relief comes to those who need it the most, such as the elderly and single parents. I have a meeting scheduled with the NRPB on Friday to discuss this further. It is also my goal to continue working on improving the road network on the island. We will be conducting much-needed road repairs, as seen already in the previous weeks, road markings to identify lanes, etc., for the safety of motorists by daytime. In addition, we will be installing road lightings in areas that are still dark so pedestrians can walk safely from public roads to their homes at night. Last weekend, I turned on the traffic lights, and we are scheduled to have the traffic lights fully operational this weekend. This week also, the road markings at the intersection from the traffic light will also be completed. We will also be focused on the repainting of pedestrian crossings, speed bumps, and other crucial road markings, such as the roundabouts. As per the lighting, also one of the issues that we are being faced every day is the lighting at the boardwalk and the Phillipsburg area. I also will commit to have these up and running by December. So for the holiday seasons, that everything is bright, and that even in the districts, so that the safety of our tourists and also our patrons are there for the holiday season. Additionally, there is still an urgent need to find a real and long-term solution to the garbage collection and disposal on St. Martin. There's already much effort being put in behind the scenes to solve the problem with the Phillipsburg dump site. But our goal is to put solutions in place that does not just address the final storage and disposal of the garbage, but deals with waste from the time it is created. We will put programs in place to teach our citizens about the most effective ways to dispose of cans, bottles, plastic, and paper, so that the separation of garbage can already begin at home. When it gets to the street, it must be previously separated so it can be adequately collected. The collection must be done in a professional, consistent, and timely manner, so waste does not sit on the roadside and become a health hazard for residents when that garbage is collected. then it must be appropriately disposed of, and whatever method we finally select must be cost efficient in the end, but it must be put in place now. I take the garbage collection in the districts very seriously. Recently, last week, parcel 6, due to default, we have replaced the then contractor with the new contractor until a new tender takes place. So for parcel 6, Meadowlands is currently the one collecting the parcels in the South Reward area until a new tender will take place to confirm the next possible company. In terms of our electricity and water supply from NVGEB, I'm happy to announce that we are making significant improvement. Many of you already know that the supply of storage of water from Dutch St. Martin has been inadequate for several years. Before the hurricanes Irma and Maria in 2017, there was already a need for improvement. The damage caused by these hurricanes made this need to invest in the water infrastructure even more critical. Thankfully, to the hard work and dedication of several individuals, we will witness the addition of the Guanabay tank, which should be up and running shortly into full operation this week. This additional water tank is only the first step in the improvement plans for the water network. As we speak, preparations are being made to start construction of the lowland water tank, which we anticipate will be completed in 4 months by February next year. Once the installation is done, the tank will be commissioned by mid-March. At the same time, construction work on the water tank at Claude Estate will be ongoing and will be completed by February 2020 for commission by the end of February. Here in Phillipsburg, motorists and residents would have already witnessed the start of work to connect the Point Blanche main line to the Sundial School. The intention is to have the work completed by mid-December this year. We will also begin constructing an additional pump line on December 1st this year that will be completed by the end of March 2020 and will go into service by the end of May. It is essential to have a properly functioning water supply system that our people can rely on in cases of disasters such as the aftermath of major hurricanes and in cases where properties are being affected by fires. We must strive to ensure that our infrastructure development considers the logistics of an ever-expanding community and that it is built to be long-lasting. I believe every home on St. Martin should have access to adequate, clean, and steady flow of drinking water. Our electricity supply is also being improved, and I'm happy to announce that NVGEB is now on track to complete the first phase of a cross-bonding project that will significantly reduce the company's energy loss. This project also considers the growing population and the amount of energy output needed to power each home. Over the past few years, NVGEB has had several cases of cable faults in its transmission lines. They recently investigated the source of the problem and found that they would have to employ the method known as cross-bonding. Cross-bonding involves connecting cables, conductors, with special joints that allow GB to cross-return these conductors between phases, thereby significantly reducing the loss of energy. The process of cross-bonding will be carried out on high-voltage lines that are longer than 1 kilometer. It is important to note that GB technicians were me to the end of my opening remarks, and I await any questions from the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Waver, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Finance and Acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, the Honorable Artwell Edion, to address you.
Good morning, colleagues. Good morning, media. Good morning, one and all. And good morning to all those viewing by the different forms of media. Today, I stand before you humbly as your Minister of Finance and Acting Minister of ECYS, Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports. It is an honor for me today to serve my country, my island, my home on this level and in this capacity. I want to assure you that we have already begun. We've hit the ground running. For example, yesterday we canceled our ceremonies to have our first meeting with the NRPB and the airport to discuss the airport financing. As Minister of Finance, in the short term, in this interim period, I'm already looking at solutions for collecting the government receivables, updating our digital systems, and of course, a solution for the airport. As Acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports, I'm going to continue on a project that I started as a Member of Parliament, where we have begun to amend one of our laws. This was a law in our tax ordinance that dealt with the tax holidays. In simple terms, the law was basically amending the fact that if you qualified for a tax holiday, that you then had to commit a $500,000 guilders as an organization to either culture, youth, or sports. This law will be continuing with my fellow colleagues in Parliament, hopefully before the end of this year. Another issue, and I would like to go a little further into that, being acting Minister of Education, Culture, Youth, and Sports, we know that the budget of the Ministry of Education is, yes, the largest chunk of the budget, 1/3 approximately. But the budget is locked up mainly into salaries and subsidies. So as a minister, I'm coming in with a different mindset in terms of how can we generate funds, money, in a ministry that has traditionally not done that. So by having a law that allows companies, if they qualify for a tax break, to at least commit a $500,000 guilders to culture, education, youth, and sports, we then have an injection of capital that was not part of our initial budget. Last year alone, we had 4 companies that were qualified in this area, so that would have meant that this year, we'd have had 2 million guilders for projects within these fields. Public education, not just in St. Martin, but in the world, has one issue: resources, financing. So in the ministry, we could come up with enough ideas, policies, and so forth, but it's difficult to execute because we do not have the financing. So in my term here, I'm looking at different ways to come up with different financial injections, which I hope to have implemented within a couple months. I want to assure you that we have hit the ground running, and I look forward to your questions, and I'm here to provide some solutions. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Edion, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Tourism, Economic Affairs, Transport, and Telecommunication, the Honorable Renee Violinas, to address you.
Good morning, members of the press. Good morning to those watching by various forms of media, and to my colleagues sitting here to my left, again, good morning. I intend to be very brief. This is my second day on the job. As my colleague indicated, we hit the ground running yesterday with a meeting with the NRPB and with the airport. On the 21st of November, we have a visit scheduled to the respective ministries for an introduction to the staff and the viewing of the transition documents. And so we will be brought up to speed as to what is taking place within the ministry. And you will be hearing much more from us after we have perused the transition document. Additionally, the Governor, His Excellency, has indicated that there are about 5 areas of priority that he would like to see addressed, and the airport was one of them. We have a meeting scheduled today with the airport at 1 p.m., and so we will be going and executing what the Governor, His Excellency, has indicated as one of the 5 areas of priority. And so that is where we intend to head within the next coming days. As we are brought up to speed, you will be hearing more from the ministry, and I'm open to questions from the media. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Violinas, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Minister of Justice and Acting Minister of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, the Honorable Egbert Duran, to address you.
Thank you, Ms. Roach. A pleasant good morning to one and all. Good morning to the Prime Minister, my fellow colleague ministers, members of the press, and everyone tuned in via various forms of medium. It is indeed an honor for me to be here this morning, once again representing you, but in another capacity. This time as the capacity as Minister of Justice and Acting Minister of VSA. Justice. This morning, first and foremost, I wish to salute all the justice workers in the justice chain, letting them know that I'm looking forward to a solid and successful working relationship with all of you, all meaning from the top to bottom, so department heads, SGs, and everybody, because you need to know that without you, there is no us. Without you, there is no justice chain. Because of your contribution to St. Martin, many times going above and beyond your call of duty, despite quite some unfavorable circumstances, as the heavy workload, St. Martin is extremely grateful to you. And today, as I stand here before you as the Minister of Justice, I'm letting you know that you are truly appreciated, and I salute you. Having said that, I do not think that it is there anymore that can be done or would deny the fact that they are according to the expectations in the Justice Ministry. At this moment, there's much discord in many areas, and I'm still being filled in and being brought up to speed as to the current state of affairs. And of course, having just been sworn in yesterday, one day is never enough for me to be able to give you a full update on the actual state of affairs within the ministry. I'm going to stand here today and announce plans and all these different promises and so forth. So I'm going to mostly enlighten you as to my objectives moving forward. My intention is to meet with civil servants within the justice chain as well as within the VSI ministry in this coming week in order to get up to speed as to what's going on with the transition documents and so forth. Based on this, I will have an understanding on where we are and how we're planning to move forward as within these two ministries. One thing is for certain that despite the financial situation of St. Martin, a solution needs to be found in order to attend these issues plaguing both ministries. When you see that especially those civil servants that are working within our uniformed forces are not being taken care of properly, and they have to resort to taking action to get what is necessary and what's duly due to them, I find this very unfortunate. Every justice worker that work should assume full responsibility for their tasks laid down before them and execute these tasks to the very best of their ability as is expected of them. It is therefore also imperative that those in charge of these workers also get whatever is due to them. As I lay down the law is given, as it is laid down in the law and is given to them. This should be done in a timely fashion whereby the norm of holding back, rewarding the workers for their services rendered for years and at times more than a decade should be broken. This should be broken, this trend. At the Ministry of Justice, there are many things that can be labeled as having top priority. For instance, the deplorable conditions of the Point Blanche Correctional Facility and other holding areas. Situations such as these are prone to hamper the manner in which the workers can execute their tasks and the dysfunctionality within the organization. I intend, together with those in charge of the various departments, to tackle the challenges head-on by working towards finding a balanced solution in order to end the discontent and the conflict within the ministry. As a member of parliament, I had the opportunity to have a very close relationship with the unions and all the other stakeholders involved within the justice ministry, for instance, department heads and also many workers. What everyone agrees is that together we can build a ministry up and is rightfully to where it ought to be, together, only together. It's not easy as 1, 2, 3, and it can take some time, but during this interim period, I intend to work towards reaching that goal. Together, and I emphasize, together we will get there and have a huge turnaround once we take up the justice ministry, as it serious should be and have taken a long time ago, as it should have been taken up a long time ago. What I'm ultimately stating here with all of this is that the ultimate goal is to raise the bar within the two ministries. With regards to the Ministry of Public Health, Social Development, and Labor, similarly, at this moment, there's much to be reviewed in an intent to meet the management within this ministry as well. An assessment of the full state of affairs. Together, we will discuss and tackle key issues For instance, the budget, the situation on the shelters, growing labor issues and unemployment, and overall healthcare and quality of the healthcare on the island. And the intent is also to focus on social issues plaguing our people. In closing, I will state that these two ministries are in some aspects two of the most critical ministries in any proper functioning government and must be taken seriously by all stakeholders. Therefore, what is important for you to know is that I have every intention to do everything within my power, together with every single justice worker, every single VSR worker, to raise the bar and for us to reach this common goal. Together we can, and together we will. I thank you, and I look forward to any questions.
Thank you, Minister Duran, for your opening remarks. At this time, I invite the Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs, the Honorable Silveria Jacobs, to address you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Roach. Good morning, colleagues in the Council of Ministers, members of the press, cabinet staff present, people of St. Martin following this communication via whichever means available. As you may know, I am Silveria Jacobs. I would hope I need no introduction, but humility will still allow me to introduce myself for those who may be seeing me for the first time. I come from a background of education of over 20 years, have spent some time in and out of government as Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, as well as sitting 2 separate terms as a Member of Parliament for just over a year and a half each. This is one of the reasons that I actually took up the responsibility, the serious challenge to lead this government in this very trying and precarious time. The instability that has plagued this country has proven to be the demise of a thriving society, a healthy population, and especially a confident population in its government. I believe that with what is to come and what the public will see, that the tide will be changing. It is a great pleasure for me to address you for the very first time in press briefing in my capacity as Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs in our constitutional state, St. Martin, at this most critical and challenging time in our island's history. At a time where criticism is the status quo, together with my colleagues, the esteemed gentleman you just heard address you, and it was noted yesterday, the youngest Council of Ministers in history, we intend to use this interim period of governing to change this tide of negativity. It is a new day with new hope and very strong, able beginnings. Having found common ground through their belief in putting country first, the National Alliance, the United St. Martin Party, the independent members of Parliament, Rolando Bryson, Luc Mercelina, and Chanel Brownbill, have a vision towards stability and are currently working on creating an interim governing program for this period, 2019-2020. Even though it's a short period, we must have a vision board. This government, supported by that coalition, takes office at a time of unacceptable levels of socio-economic and environmental deterioration, and it will take all the necessary steps, together with the population, to stop the deterioration of this country. By accepting this formation assignment as formateur and now Prime Minister, and as we have pledged, we will be carrying out the 5 points as were stipulated by His Excellency Governor E.B. Holliday. We talked at length about those points yesterday, so I won't see any need to repeat them all at this point. But know that, even as a Member of Parliament, before this government fell, I was working on a budget amendment that would see funds that had been allocated in 2019 budget and approved by the then majority to go towards a host of consultants. Some of those funds, about $1 million and change, have been redirected in a budget amendment by then MP Sylveria Jacobs, and handed into Parliament on Monday morning. Those changes will see, just as my colleague and the now Minister of Education, Culture, Youth and Sport, more funds being directed towards the youth of St. Martin. And what a great day it is to be announcing this here, as today is the International Day for the Rights of Children all around the world, the United Nations celebration. And we must not ever forget, both Minister Arian and I just left the celebratory ceremony by the ministry being held together with the French counterparts, where children from the island of St. Martin, Dutch and French, one island, coming together not only on St. Martin Day as people think, but even in these occasions to celebrate our children, to celebrate what is now being, for this year, Ready, Set, Protect. And we know that on St. Martin, the laws are there to protect our children. And we know that we are ready to protect our children. But sometimes we see that we have very big gaps and holes in being able to carry out and execute that in the interest of the rights of all these children. As such, I really feel that we need to focus in this short period on what is really lacking, for instance, in the areas of the Voogdijraad, where the rights of children whose parents fall short, they are the ones that have to pick it up. I have personally witnessed and have heard some horror stories in the past few months of children out of school, of children who are walking the streets, of children who are lacking guidance, or children with serious social and emotional behavioral problems that cannot be addressed on a day-to-day basis in our schools. And that is why it is so important that we spend the money on our children. Without a strong foundation of our youth, without a strong support and protection of these that we want to continue to cliche as the future of St. Martin, we will have no future. So today, with this Council of Ministers, this very youthful Council of Ministers, I pledge to put the youth first. As my colleague also mentioned, I believe two of them, yesterday, and even before that, when we were having our pre-meetings with the Secretariat of the Council of Ministers, and they asked us whether we wanted a celebration. I said, in this difficult time, for me, it is not important, but I will check with my colleagues. That is the way I lead. And they all agreed. There was no need, even though, of course, family and friends would have loved to celebrate the momentous historic occasion. We sufficed to take a few photos and move straight to a working meeting with the NRPB and the airport management and holding representative. We spent the entire afternoon from 1 p.m. to 5 p.m., albeit distracted for a little bit by a fire alarm, but we went back and we finished that meeting. We received two very informative presentations and the promise of all the necessary documents needed for us to take that very important decision as to the agreements needed to reconstruct our airport. In no way will this government run away from that responsibility. And I would like to reassure you, today we will be visiting the airport as well. I've listened to the words of our Justice Minister, the prison, the workers of the justice chain in education. Similarly, the workers are crying out. I have already received, as General Affairs Minister, a request to meet with the Wixu PSU, which will be honored. And this week, people think that you have a time to even get pens and pencils in. Without that, without computers being hooked up, without all the tools being available, the necessary meetings, the necessary acclimatization for new ministers with their ministries, with the handing over of the various transition documents is taking place. And as the end of the week is here, we will know as a council what is before us and how we will proceed. And I'm sure by next week, you will have even more information with which you can inform the public, and we pledge to continue to keep you informed on a weekly basis. Thank you very much, and I look forward to any questions from the press.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs, for your opening remarks. If you've just joined us, you are watching the live Council of Ministers press briefing. We now move on to the question and answer session. Stephen Cerillion of PJ82 Radio, you have the floor.
Excellencies, good morning. My question is for all ministers present. First of all, seeing the fact that you assumed the position yesterday as individual ministers, what is first and foremost that you're looking forward to tackling as individual ministers?
Thank you, Stephen. Good morning. I think I clearly stated that for the entire council, we have as a priority to get the much-needed financing for the airport regulated. That is for us a priority, as St. Martin's Airport not only serves St. Martin, we are already seeing that, and it's a positive outlook, by the way, that we received yesterday in terms of the expectation of arrivals was at 60% for 2019, and they're already at 80% of the 2016 numbers. So for us, that is a great indication, but the challenges that come with that is the lack of space, the frustration of not only the passengers, but also the employees that go there day to day, have gone through the transition of being under tents in the heat, with fans and air conditioning later, moving into a portion of the building. So it continues to be a challenge for all involved, but the management and the holding promised that they have some plans in place, but of course, the financing is necessary to be able to carry out those necessary changes. So that is definitely our priority as a total council of ministers, and for the ministers that have to actually sign off on those agreements. For me, as Minister of General Affairs, I will be more specific. The laws that need to be changed that fall within the ministry are being looked at. I haven't been able to sit with the SG yet as to find out how far they are, but one of the main, so I made sure to have someone within the cabinet who is able to fast track that for us, as well as work together with Parliament on the specific legislation as was required in our formation assignment, but also the budget is a legislation that needs to be finalized. We will also prioritize that. And any and all legislation that are in the final stages at this moment. For me, it is a disappointment to come and go in Parliament and still hear that certain legislation that was there since whether it's 2013, 14, or 15 is still pending. And for me also it is to educate the public, because a lot of times we hear, we need to execute, or we need a law for this, or we need a law for that, while the law is already in existence. So educating the public, and I would work with DCOM with that, on what laws are there, and we will start, of course, with those protective laws for our youth, and moving forward as to which others we can amend in the short term and make plans for the medium and long term as that is concerned.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Dimitri Wheatfield of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Hi, so good morning to St. Martin and the new Council of Ministers. My first question is to the Prime Minister, the Finance Minister, and the Minister of TIAT. Given you've had a couple of meetings already with the airport, so what are the steps in concrete terms that are going to be taken in the final weeks to finalize the financing of the airport reconstruction? How soon can you expect these agreements to be signed? And when can we expect reconstruction to start?
Thank you for that question, Dimitri. As I mentioned, we met yesterday, so we got a lot of information. The documentation has to still be received by all ministers. It will be sent digitally, as it is a lot of documentation, all of the agreements, etc. We are going to the airport today, and on Friday we're meeting with the technical team. And thereafter we'll be able to ascertain what will be done. So that is the plan for this week. And moving forward, once we have that information at the end of the week, we'll be able to better determine the next steps. If any of the other ministers care to add?
I think that one of the things that the airport presented in the meeting yesterday was that they are waiting on the financing to commence with package 2, which is the redesign of the interior of the building, and also adjustments to the outer shell of the building. And so the financing process will happen after all of the documentation is received and it is reviewed, and we take it from there. And like the Prime Minister said, it's over $100 pages of documentation that we have to review. So on Friday, we should have some more answers for you.
And I would just like to add that, as Minister Violinus mentioned, once the agreements are signed, because that was one of my specific questions, what exactly will happen then? Because we can say, hurry up and sign the agreements, and then it's another wait for something else. And it was made clear that once those agreements are signed, that the return from the bondholders of a $5 million will come back to the airport, with which they can start the process of the, what was it, phase 2? Package 2, that's what they termed it, which is very, very important to actually deal with some of the challenges that they're facing right now.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs and Minister Violinus. Nakisha Bozeman of the Daily Herald, you have the floor.
Good morning, ministers, and good morning to all those tuned in today. My first question is for Minister Duran. What is government's position on the construction of the new General Hospital, given that the NA fraction had reservations about the project?
Thank you, Ms. Boseman, for your question. I have not met with the SG or the department heads within the VSR ministry as yet. This is what I plan to do today and also in the coming days. And you asked a second part of the question. Can you repeat?
The question was, what was the position for the construction of the new hospital, given that the NA fraction had reservations about the project in the past?
Okay. As a member of parliament, in general, I had a reservation based on the situation in regards to the contractor, which was filing for insolvency. And based on a meeting with the hospital a few months ago, they secured and informed us of the above mentioned, and basically the hospital is a foundation that operates on its own. So it's not a matter of this government now coming in and stopping the project. The project is ongoing, and they gave various securities, but I will definitely be looking into it and getting more information now being the acting minister of VSI with that is concerned. So it's not a matter of we're going to stop the process or anything like that. As a representative of the people then and now in a different capacity, I believe it's my duty to do the due diligence and fact check certain things, and that was what it was when I discussed it as a member of parliament. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister Duran. Lyndon Brown of BCN TV, you have the floor.
Good morning to the people of St. Martin and to our minister today. Question to the Minister of Education. Minister of Education, there has been a pending safety law for the schools to combat fighting and so forth. Normally, the emphasis is on the children, Minister, and not on the relation with teachers and children. Of course, there are a lot of things that take place internally that you don't hear from the media. But the emphasis is on the children fighting left, right, and center, Minister. What do you know about the law? And what is the first priority as minister you want to deal with?
Thank you, Mr. Lyndon Brown. First, I'd like to say that I haven't met with my SG as yet either. We came in yesterday. I met with my SG, but we didn't get to discuss any matters that were already in progress. But I would like to say on my personal belief that policing alone won't solve fighting or bullying in school. Bullying, fighting in school, there's a core issue, reason why this is happening. We could add more police, we could keep children locked in school for a longer time, but that doesn't stop people from fighting. When I was in high school, we had fights in school, not outside of school, and very bad fights to that. I believe that the bullying and fighting, one of the core issues is our society, how children are growing up. Poverty. There are a lot of underlying issues why we're having bullying, which I want to address and speaking with the ministry and first get the information, the data on all of these issues on our island to be able to tackle them beyond just policing. You mentioned a law, and I'm not too familiar with which law you were referring to, so if you can give a clear indication which law you meant, I will get back to you.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Given our time constraints, I would allow one more round of questions. Stephen Cerillion, you have the floor.
Prime Minister, my final question is for you. Seeing the fact that you have the Justice Minister who is responsible for VSA as well, the Minister of Finance in charge of Education, and you as Prime Minister responsible for Minister Plenipotentiary, how soon do we foresee the other ministers being sworn in to occupy such vital positions within government?
Thank you, Stephen, for that question. Especially because I want to go back to the reason why at this time that we opted to move at this stage of the formation process with the first 5 ministers that had cleared. The state of St. Martin, the continued finger pointing as to who is to blame that the airport construction cannot go on, the fact that the bondholders continue to hold not just the bond, but the airport hostage because they do not understand our laws, as the approval for the signing of this reconstruction could have taken place as of the 4th or 5th of October, whenever the budget had been instated or gone into effect, and the national decrees were signed by His Excellency the Governor. It's not one, it's several, I believe 6 national decrees that were signed and countersigned by the government. This authorized the sitting caretaker government to sign off on the documents, the agreements, etc. Why? The motion of September 25th came after the decisions that had been made. Also, in the complete budget discussions, it had been made clear that financing for the airport was a priority, and it was agreed upon at that time. It continued to be agreed upon. What some people are drawing conclusions from is the fact that as opposition members, you questioned whether it was the best option for the airport or not. In representing your country, in sitting in parliament, you have to hold government accountable. And if government had been forthcoming in giving the answers in a timely fashion, they could have gone through and done what they had to do. Had they provided the documents as we are getting them today, there would have been more clarity, and for sure that this would have gone on. Also, there was a majority in Parliament at the time. So the question should be, why didn't the chair call those meetings when they had a majority, or didn't they? So to point the fingers back and forth and say that this new coalition, because of its motion of no confidence in this government or the previous government, is responsible for the lack of progress at the airport is very erroneous. And that is why we saw it fit to come in even with just 5 members to address this issue in the interest of St. Martin. The other 2 members are still going through the process, and as soon as that is finalized, I will have that final discussion with the governor and inform you accordingly as to when they will be coming in. With that, we will have 7 members, and then the proposed minister for The Hague will take up his position. Many people are also confused as to the legality of me holding that position. I am not holding the position, but as Prime Minister and Minister of General Affairs and the Council of Ministers, the plenipotentiary minister in The Hague speaks on our behalf. They take decisions that the Council of Ministers make and bring it. Anything that we need to send forth in our relations and discussions with The Hague at this moment can be directed through the cabinet, which is still there, and if it requires the presence of a minister, then is when I will have to represent. But other than that, it is not as if I was sworn in as that minister, so any and all persons who feel that there is some illegality with the Constitution taking place can rest assured that this Prime Minister would never do that. With that, Mr. Cerillion, I hope to have answered your question. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister Jacobs. Dimitri, you have the floor.
My final question is to the Justice Minister. Earlier in your presentation, you said that the Point Blanche prison is your top priority. And given the recent concerns about the Point Blanche prison from various persons in society, what are your plans to upgrade the prison in the coming weeks? You said you don't have no plans, but you have objectives. Can you elucidate on that further? You also said that you want to present a balanced solution. What exactly does that look like?
Thank you very much for your question. Basically, when I say I want to provide a balanced solution, but before we can ascertain how we move forward, I have to have the sit down with the SG along with the director of the prison. I've worked in the prison for a few months last year. I know firsthand what is going on in the prison. I recently had a tour of the prison 2 months ago, so it's nothing new to me in terms of the situation. But as a member of parliament, the responses and the answers were conflicting. So now in the position as justice minister, I've decided to take a hands-on approach and tackle the issue. And as soon as there's more information available, I will be abreast you, the people of St. Martin, along with the press.
Thank you, Minister Duran. Nikisha, you have the final question, or your final question.
My final question is for Minister Ian. What are some of the changes that can be expected to the draft 2020 budget, and what does government plan to prioritize in the budget?
Good morning, Ms. Boseman. I haven't had an opportunity as yet to see the budget, so I can't say that, and I haven't had a meeting with the SG as yet pertaining to the budget. So I'm hopeful to be able to answer you at the next press briefing or through the media.
Thank you, Minister Edion. Lyndon Brown, you have the final question.
Final question to the Minister of Justice. Minister of Justice, the people of St. Martin sometimes confuse, and there will be statement like this. They are injustice. Do you plan to meet sometimes or write a document to the chief prosecutor? Because people are just confused sometimes. Go so far to make available the laws of St. Martin. Because there are a lot of misunderstanding, confusion. Do you plan to approach these matters?
Thank you, Mr. Brown, for your question. So basically, in a nutshell, you're saying if I plan to tackle the injustice that is taking place with the prosecutors or with the people, I'm not too sure on what your question was.
I'm not saying injustice. People are confused. The way the justice are going in St. Martin, they don't understand. So I'm asking you if you plan to write a document, meet with the prosecutor to at least go over some of these areas where people do not understand the laws. So I go so far of making the laws available for the people can understand, when they are right or when they are wrong.
Okay, I understand your question now. Well, there's nothing new that needs to be written. The law is already there. The Constitution is there as well. But what I would recommend then, based on your question, is that there are these 5 books that are available, the Laws of St. Martin, and there's a lot of information in there, and I would recommend for those persons that you said are a bit confused and so forth, that they buy these books and would be able to be more up-to-date as to their rights in society, because there's where all the laws are written as well.
Thank you, Minister Duran. I would allow the Prime Minister to add to that.
Thank you, Relika, and Minister Justice and Mr. Brown. I just felt the need to say that CoM is St. Martin's government vehicle for informing and educating the public. And as it falls under my ministry, I will be looking into possibilities for highlighting certain laws which are confusing, that we can actually have some educational programs through the CoM, which is government's vehicle to do so. So I will definitely put that on my agenda as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Prime Minister. Honorable Ministers of the Council, members of the media, radio listeners and online viewers, this brings us to the end of the live Council of Ministers press briefing for today, Wednesday, November 20th, 2019. For rebroadcast, tune in at 7 p.m. on St. Martin Cable TV and via St. Martin Gov Radio 107.9 FM. For video on demand, log on to the official government's website at stmartingov.org. On behalf of the Department of Communication, I'm Rolika Roach and bidding you a pleasant day further.